All right. Good evening. For reals, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission meeting for Monday, June 26th, 2023. My name is Shauna Bonston. I am proudly the chairperson for the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. Welcome. I'd like to read the following statement. For public comments and questions during the meeting, if you are not present, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during this meeting so that we may hear from you. And with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 6:01 p.m. May we have roll call?
Good afternoon. I'll take roll call. Chairperson Bonstein.
Present.
Commissioner Lester.
Here.
Commissioner Avagyan.
Present.
Commissioner Ordubegyan.
Here.
Commissioner Amirian.
Here.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda.
Item 1B, flag salute.
Excellent. What is the next item on the agenda?
Item 2, posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Monday, June 26, 2023 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by June 22, 2023 before 5 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Excellent. What is the next item on the agenda?
Approval of minutes. Approval of minutes for the regular Transportation and Parking Commission meeting of February 27, 2023. However, due to technical issues that arose at the previous meeting, no minutes were recorded.
Very well. What is the next item on the agenda?
Item 4, presentations. There are no presentations for this meeting.
Thank you. And the next item?
Item 5, consent items. However, we do not have any consent items.
This is going quickly so far. What is the next item on the agenda?
Item 6, action items. Staff respectfully recommends the Transportation and Parking Commission provide feedback and note and file the report regarding the Glen Oaks Bicycle Facility Study.
Thank you. It looks like I would start with asking if there's a motion to provide the discussed feedback to staff and note and file the report regarding the Glen Oaks Bicycle Facility Study.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, we have a short presentation for the commission, and then after that, we welcome any feedback that the TPC has for our staff so we can incorporate it into.
That would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Sure. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Pastor Casanova, our principal traffic engineer, to come up and provide the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Imrani. Chairperson Bonston and members of the commission, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Pastor Casanova, as Mr. Imrani mentioned, Principal Traffic Engineer in Public Works. And today we'll be going through a few slides to give you some information and update regarding the Glen Oaks Bicycle Facility Study. So as a brief update to the Glen Oaks, in this update for the Glen Oaks Boulevard Bicycle Facility Study, we'll be seeking feedback from the Transportation and Parking Commission and the Glendale community on a few alternatives that were evaluated in the study. We'll provide a brief review of the project background, current and past staff study efforts that have led to this point, and technical aspects included in the study, including alternatives that were evaluated and findings and recommendations. Staff's been working with the Rosmoyne Mountain Neighborhood Area Association and community really for decades regarding concerns for cut-through traffic and speeding in their neighborhood, including Glen Oaks Boulevard. Over the years, there have been several traffic calming treatments implemented, such as speed humps, speed lumps, traffic signs and pavement markings, striping to address, and some striping to address these concerns. The Glendale community has expressed strong interest in expanding also the bicycle facilities network on Glen Oaks Boulevard, as well as the city as a whole. And in the 2012 Bicycle Transportation Plan, it recommends the repurposing of a portion of Glen Oaks Boulevard roadway to implement bicycle facilities, which then brings us to here today, where staff will present the aspects, alternatives, and findings of the study in more detail, and respectfully request feedback from the Transportation and Parking Commission and the public. Public Works procured the services of a traffic engineering consultant firm and conducted a thorough analysis of integrating bicycle facilities on Glen Oaks Boulevard. The limits of the study are shown in the exhibit above and include Glen Oaks Boulevard between Geneva Street and Central Avenue. These limits were broken down into 5 individual street segments, and we'll be taking a closer look at these project alternatives of each project alternative for each of the individual street segment in subsequent slides. As mentioned, this was a comprehensive study that looked at various areas of potential areas of impacts and benefits of the project alternatives. Level of service was analyzed to assess the traffic flow impacts. Vehicle miles traveled were assessed to evaluate potential reduction in driving miles. Traffic diversion or cut-through traffic was assessed to evaluate the potential benefits and impacts. A benefit and cost ratio was also looked at that evaluates the safety aspects of and benefits of the project and compares those to the cost of the project. And lastly, a level of traffic stress analysis was conducted. Now, level of traffic stress is a relatively new terminology, and it involves an approach that quantifies the amount of discomfort that a cyclist feels when they're bicycling close to traffic. The study considered 3 alternatives. Alternative 1, as shown on the left, proposes to enhance existing shared lane markings on Glen Oaks Boulevard that are termed sharrows. These would be enhanced with green-colored pavement underneath to enhance visibility for drivers. Alternative 2, as shown in the middle, proposes Class 2 bike lanes that provide a dedicated lane for bicyclists. Alternative 3, as shown on the right, proposes Class 4 protected or separated bike lanes that include a buffer area between the bicyclists and the cars and include raised elements such as traffic bollards. Now we'll take a closer look at the alternatives that were evaluated for each of the street segments. And we'll refer back to that initial exhibit that showed numbers 1 through 5, 1 on the right. And this street segment would be for Glen Oaks Boulevard between Geneva Street and Howard Street. And on the images on the slide, please note that north will be to your right. And so on the upper left, we see that this street, that the street is 60 feet wide and under existing conditions, and there are 2 traffic lanes in each direction with parking on both sides of the street and white sharrow markings on Glen Oaks Boulevard. Alternative 1 proposes to maintain the existing traffic lanes and parking and enhance the existing sharrow markings with green-colored pavement markings underneath, again, to improve visibility. Alternative 2 proposes to repurpose a portion of the roadway and include a 2-way left turn lane, Class 2 bike lanes in each direction, and reducing the through traffic lanes from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 traffic lane in each direction, and maintaining parking on both sides of the street. I should note that we mentioned an alternative 3, and the alternative 3 included the Class 4 protected bike lanes. Those are not shown in the street segment because there was not enough street width, the street wasn't wide enough to accommodate those additional buffer areas. So the Class 4 alternative is not shown on this street segment. So in the next street segment, this is now Glen Oaks Boulevard between Howard Street and Jackson Street. Very similar to the previous street segment, still 60 feet wide. The difference here in this street segment is that it incorporates bus lanes or bus drop-off lanes or a bus zone that is located at the Jackson Street intersection. So the street, again, is still 60 feet wide. Existing traffic lanes are 2 in each direction, parking on both sides of the street, with the exception at the intersections there are those bus stops at Jackson. Alternative 1 enhances the Sharrow markings with the green pavement, and Alternative 2, again, includes the repurposing of a portion of the roadway to include the center 2-way left turn lanes and the bicycle lanes in each direction. In this street segment, this is similar to now the first street segment. There are no bus stops here, so very similar to the segment between Geneva and Howard. Glen Oaks Boulevard is 60 feet wide. Existing traffic lanes are 2 in each direction. Sharrow markings, parking on both sides. Alternative 1 proposes to enhance the Sharrows with green pavement, and Alternative 2 to incorporate the center 2-way left turn lane and bicycle lanes through road repurposing. This segment is Glen Oaks Boulevard between Louise and Brand. So here there is a difference in the street width. Whereas the previous slides we saw where Glen Oaks Boulevard was 60 feet wide, here Glen Oaks Boulevard reduces to 56 feet, so 4 foot less. And what that results in under the existing cross-section is still 2 traffic lanes in each direction, Sharrow markings for bicyclists, but parking only on the north side of the street. There's no existing parking on the south side. Under Alternative 1, the traffic lanes would remain the same, parking would remain the same. It would enhance the Sharrow markings with the green pavement. And Alternative 2 will propose the road repurposing to include the 2-way left turn lane, the bicycle lanes in each direction, maintain parking on the north side, and a small buffer on the south side adjacent to the bike lanes. In this street segment, this is Glen Oaks Boulevard between Brand Boulevard and Central Avenue. And here the roadway takes a different context. It's different, it's much wider. There's a variable width raised median in the middle of Glen Oaks. And there's essentially 2 separated roadways, one westbound and one eastbound. So on the upper left is the existing that shows that the westbound and the eastbound directions are both 40 feet wide. In the westbound direction, there's an existing Class 2 bicycle lane and 3 through traffic lanes. In the eastbound direction, there is 3 through traffic lanes and only Sharrow markings for the eastbound. Under Alternative 1, shown at the upper right, it maintains the existing westbound Class 2 bike lane, 3 traffic lanes, and in the eastbound direction, maintains the 3 travel lanes and enhances essentially the Sharrow markings with the green pavement. Alternative 2 in the lower left now proposes to implement Class 2 bike lanes in each direction. So it adds for the eastbound direction, changes the Sharrow markings to Class 2, still maintaining the 3 travel lanes in each direction. And Alternative 3, which is the lower right, then incorporates or proposes Class 4 bicycle facilities with the buffer area, the raised elements for the bicyclists, curb running bike lanes, and maintaining the 3 traffic lanes on Glen Oaks. So as mentioned in the previous slides, this was a comprehensive analysis, looked at various technical aspects, one of which was the traffic flow. So here we see on the screen a summary chart of the level of service analysis for the intersections, for the signalized intersections. And what we saw is that under existing conditions, when compared to the roadway repurposing options, which would be alternatives 2 and alternatives 3 with the class 2 and class 4 bike lanes, that there's really little or no change in the operation and level of service, and only a minor one that's circled in red at Louise and Glen Oaks that goes from level of service A, which is really free flow conditions, to level service B, which is still really a good traffic flow. In this summary, this shows now evaluating the level of service in the street segments, so between the signalized intersections. So here we see that the level of service would go from, anticipated from a level of service A currently to a level of service D, but it still remains within that acceptable level. And what we see is really an opportunity here to really provide some discouragement from that, for that cut-through traffic that is used to cutting through the Ross Moines area. The study also looked at the vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. So the takeaway from this chart that we see here is that we see on Glen Oaks Boulevard that there's a anticipated significant reduction in the vehicle miles traveled on Glen Oaks. So again, what we see here is that opportunity that this could lead to a reduction in cut-through traffic through the Ross Moines area. This is now a heat map that's generated by the vehicle miles traveled traffic model. And what this shows us in color codes, that in the areas that we see green on the map is where there would be a very notable reduction in VMT, in vehicle miles traveled. Where we see the red would be where there would be that potential for increase in vehicle miles traveled. So what we see here, the green showing on Glen Oaks, again, reduction in vehicle miles traveled, potential reduction in cut-through traffic. And where we see the red, we see that the really prominent red, that traffic would go to the 134 freeway. So we see that opportunity for this project really pushing traffic to those higher capacity roadway networks such as the freeway. And so here, this is a summary chart of what I mentioned, the level of traffic stress. Again, this is a way to quantify that discomfort level that cyclists feel when they bicycle next to traffic. On the upper part of there's a table that says LTS1 through LTS5. LTS1, just briefly reading it off, says suitable for almost all ages and bicycle abilities. This could be equated to, if we want to visualize it, to a dedicated bike path with no vehicles around, no vehicle travel. Somebody can just get on their bicyclist and travel on that bicycle path. A level of stress 5, or level of traffic stress 5, which is at the bottom, suitable only for very few riders, we could visualize this as a major arterial roadway with maybe 6 travel lanes, left turns, very busy, heavy traffic, driveways all over the place, and really and no bicycle lane facilities, making it, a lot more challenging for bicyclists. So that would be like a level 5. Down below is what we are anticipating, or what they were gauged at for these alternatives. Alternative 1, which is the enhanced Sharrows. Oh, sorry, I'll start with the no build. The no build at the top, really, we're currently at an estimated level of traffic stress 4. So there's limited facilities out on the street, which makes it a little more difficult for the bicyclist. Under alternative 1, we see an improvement with the Sharrows and reduction to a level of traffic stress 3 between Geneva and Brand. And between Brand and Central, it's a little wider, more traffic lanes, that's a 4. For alternative 2, we see that lowering to level of stress traffic stress 2 and 3. And lastly, alternative 3, the class 4 buffered bicycle facilities would be the level of traffic stress 2 all the way across. So in this, there's a lot of numbers up here, but this was basically a summary of the benefit cost ratio, which really takes a look at the safety benefits of the project, compares them to really the dollars that could be spent on this project, and shows you what that potential benefit is over a 20-year lifespan. So what we see here on the right portion of both charts under the collision benefit area, we see that there's a potential benefit of anywhere between $1.5 and $1.6 million over a 20-year lifespan. So in conclusion, again, this was a comprehensive study that looked at all the potential impacts and benefits of the different alternatives 1, 2, and 3. The study that was put together recommended alternative 3. Now, when we discussed the alternatives, we mentioned that was alternative 3 was the class 4. But in reality, what alternative 3 is recommending is the class 4 facility on Glen Oaks between Brand and Central. And what we saw as alternative 2, the class 2 bicycle lane facilities between Geneva and Brand. So again, alternative 3 would be that combination. And so that is what the study showed as the ultimate recommendation after evaluating all the technical aspects of it. Staff is here today to respectfully request the feedback from the Transportation and Parking Commission. We anticipate our next steps would be moving towards the community outreach portion, and then subsequently going to City Council for approval. And with that, that's the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if there's any questions or comments from the commissioners, and then we also have a few cards for folks that are present here.
Excellent. How many cards do we have, approximately? 10. And do we know how many folks on the line? Okay, excellent. Are there any questions that the commission has, or shall we hear from those? You have a question, please.
I think maybe we should go through the calls first, and
Excellent.
then I can ask my questions.
Okay.
May I ask one question before, just to clarify something?
Yes, clarifying question, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So, to be very clear, the difference between alternative 2 and 3 is basically just that the section between Central and Brand has a class 4. Both alternatives have bike lanes going all the way through, right? So Brand to Geneva will then be class 2, correct?
Yes, Chairperson Bonstein and members of the commission, Commissioner Lester, that's correct. There'll be bicycle lanes all the way through. So alternative 3 is that combination of the class 2 bicycle facilities and the class 4.
Thanks very much.
If there are no other clarifying questions, I'm prepared to begin to call up folks. And I'd say I'm comfortable, unless we set it otherwise, for 3 minutes person. And then if there's anyone representing a group, we can consider 4 minutes. With that, I'm going to call Eric Howland. And I'm going to apologize profusely all throughout the meeting if I mispronounce anyone's name. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for giving me a chance to comment on this issue. I am a 26-year Glendale resident, 20 years in the Ross Moines neighborhood, and often choose active transportation like walking or riding a bike to get around the city of Glendale. Since I live nearby, I often use Glen Oaks. Having used Glen Oaks, I can say the street is very fast, busy, and is not safe for car drivers, people who walk, or people who ride bicycles. There are no left turn pockets, and sharrows are inadequate infrastructure for people who bike. This is especially true for the section between Brand and Central, Part 5 in the presentation, where cars can speed in excess of 50 miles per hour. Alternative 1 makes no change and should not be considered under any circumstance. I advocate for Alternative 3 for Section 5 and the Alternative 2 parts for Sections 1 through 4. The introduction of a left turn lane will substantially help with car crashes and make it easier for cross-traffic and cars entering and exiting driveways. This Alternative 3 approach will mitigate cut-through traffic. Nearly all traffic diversion is expected to be diverted to freeways and not residential neighborhoods. There is virtually no delay resulting from the Alternative 3 approach. Only 3 seconds of delay estimated for Jackson. Finally, putting in bike lanes will connect 2 existing lanes. The upcoming North Brand Quick Build. This gets us closer to a biking network, and we need to enable active transportation throughout Glendale. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, Lisa Kuda. And just so you're ready, the speaker after that will be Casey Atchley.
Hi, thank you for your time tonight. Lisa Kuda lived on Geneva Street, a few houses up from Glendale, for 16 years now, and we've really been hoping for this since before we even bought our house. You know, just we drive or cycle daily on Glen Oaks, and it's a mess. And I think it could also benefit the businesses along Glen Oaks could benefit as well. Because right now I see parents dropping off their kids at the dance place and cars whizzing by it like 52 lanes of cars. And then also with that left turn lane, that's going to help a lot with stopping that whole, when somebody stops, they go around, not seeing that there's like somebody on a bicycle, usually me. I don't know how many times I've almost been hit there. But anyway, I know my block's fully supportive of it, and we hope to get this done. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm Casey, and this is Maxwell. We live at the intersection of Stalker in Maryland and Rossmoyne, and we frequent the corridor of Glen Oaks in question tonight. I'm a recreational cyclist in the area, and I cross Glen Oaks at Luis as a pedestrian on my way to work every day. Maxwell and I really want to feel safe as a driver and as a passenger, as cyclists and as pedestrians in Glendale, but the truth is that we watch cars blow the stop sign out front of our window at all hours of the day. We often dodge right-turning cars when pushing the stroller through crosswalks, and it isn't uncommon that we hear drag races and donuts on Brand just north of Glen Oaks. On the bike, I've been told, in less polite terms, to share the road on the 1600 block of Grandview, the 1700 block of Chevy Chase, and the 200 block of Glen Oaks. What all of those blocks have in common is that they all have sharrows. That's why I strongly recommend against Alternative 1, more sharrows, as a solution to this stretch on Glen Oaks. Rather, we would like to see the Commission recommend Alternatives 2 and for the one stretch near Central, Alternative 3. This morning, NPR reported on the findings of the Governor's Highway Safety Association that found pedestrian deaths in the United States are at their highest in 40 years. One of several reasons cited by the association was the steady increase in size of the average vehicle on the road and the failure of our pedestrian cycling infrastructure to follow pace with that growth. As cars get bigger, Maxwell and I need better infrastructure to keep us visible and safe. And the cumulative 5-second delay to car travel on this stretch as a result of our Alternatives 2 and 3 is a small cost for our safety. So much more can be done in Glendale to achieve the safety, but creating a network of dedicated and protected bike lanes on a road like Glen Oaks that connects our residential neighborhoods to the rest of the community is a great place to start. Thanks for your attention and your consideration, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next speaker, Cheyenne Hamadi, followed by Alex Emery.
Hello. I've lived in the Verdugo Viejo neighborhood for a couple years now, and I want to recommend Alternative 3, protected bike lanes between Brand and Central, plus Alternative 2, the regular bike lanes, Brand to Geneva. This would reduce speed because, as we all know, Glen Oaks is not safe. There's lots of speeding, and sharrows don't work very well. The cut-through traffic would be addressed with these alternatives. Combining existing bike lanes is crucial to creating a network of safe bike lanes that's effective in getting more people to bike. I'd love to see as many protected bike lanes as possible to help make biking safe and promote more biking and less driving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alex Ameri. I'm a resident at 1129 Cedar in the Ross Moines area. I'm a recreational cyclist, a commuter who often commutes from Glendale to Beverly Hills, 16 miles each way. And it's once you leave Glendale, it gets perceptively worse. So we try and make Glendale as best as possible. I'm also a former board member and president of Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition and have been an active member of the cycling community throughout the LA County area, trying to integrate all bike lanes and transportation, which affects not only commuters, recreational cyclists, but also people who cannot afford transportation methods such as vehicles if they need to get to work. This is a vital, important step we need to take in the city of Glendale. I'm advocating for alternative number 3, not alternative number 1 at all. Sharrows are pretty much useless. They have some benefit to give psychology of, okay, I can use this lane, but to be truthful, most people in this day and age do not pay attention when they're driving. As an experiment, my fiance and I drove from Beverly Hills to Glendale, and while I was driving, she had the experiment of saying if she can get the attention of somebody else as a passenger. So she just looked over and waved. No person on the entire trip looked back. Most people, despite their cars being 2016 or newer, were actually holding their phones and looking at them while driving on the freeway. The result of this psychologically is because there's an assumed safety that there's multiple lanes in traffic heading the same direction, there's leeway to move around. If you narrow the corridor of traffic, you force people to pay attention to what's happening. And that's very important, especially when it comes from Brand through Central. You need the alternative 3, the protected bike lane, because at the very least, they will hit the bollards. They will hit a curb before they actually potentially lose a life. That is crucial. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Cole Bazenon. I'm going to call out the handwriting a little bit. The next speaker would then be
Apologies
Alec. Go
Good
ahead.
evening, commissioners. My name is Cole Bazemore, 2-year resident of Citrus Grove. Yeah, you were close. That's on me, though. Just here tonight to recommend alternative 3. I think it's very clear that this is the best alternative. It's going to improve safety for bicyclists and for other road users, pedestrians. I think myself, I use this corridor quite often to get to businesses and various destinations that are along Glen Oaks. I mean, getting to Kenneth Village, Brand Boulevard, there's my dentist right up there. So to be able to use that corridor along Glen Oaks would be really helpful for me. Again, the safety improvements, it doesn't appear that there's going to be that much cut-through traffic as a result of this, so I think that's a big win. So again, please support alternative 3, and let's bring some more bike lanes to Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Alec Bartrusov, and I think I messed up your last name too. Next speaker after that will be Amy Clem.
I have some slides.
Excellent. Bartrusov.
Bartrosov, yeah. Good evening. Hello, my name is Alec Bartrosov. I'm here today on behalf of Walk Bike Glendale. I want to thank you for your service as a former TPC member, and I currently serve on the Sustainability Commission, so thank you for your time. I wanted to express our extreme enthusiasm and support for Alternative 3. We're very much excited about this project for various reasons that I can get into and happy to discuss offline, and if you have any questions as well. Next slide, please. One of the reasons why we're very excited about this project is that some folks in this room were around when the 2012 bike plan was being established. Part of the 2012 bike plan does call for bike lanes on Glen Oaks along this section of Glen Oaks. So we've been very patiently waiting for this improvement. We think it's a long time coming. In fact, a couple years after the bike plan was adopted in 2012, the street was resurfaced or retouched with some fresh striping. And unfortunately, it did not include the bike lanes that were promised as part of the bike plan. So, you know, that's water under the bridge. It was 10 years ago, but we're very excited to see this coming back, and we'd like to see these improvements once and for all. Next slide, please. This is just the visual showing a segment of the bike plan as it was adopted in 2012. It shows the blue section, Glen Oaks Boulevard, where the bike lane was expected. I also wanted to point out the rest of the network. The existing infrastructure is very lackluster. We do have sharrows, which many people have pointed out, and I think many understand are not useful by any stretch of the imagination. The sections in blue is really where the only place that we have bike lanes currently. So it's very mismatched. There are not two bike lanes that intersect in the city, with one exception, which is at Glen Oaks and Sonora. So there's no other bike lanes, I should say, that connect within the city of Glendale, and part of this project would change that. Next slide, please. One of the things that it would connect to is the pilot parking protected bike lane that you guys have approved and council has approved, that I believe we expect in September of this year. The city's first ever parking protected bike lane on Brand Boulevard between Glen Oaks and Mountain. So we're very much excited about that pilot project, and we're happy to see this current project that's being proposed also intersect with Brand Boulevard. So for various reasons, we're excited about the bike plan. Next slide, please. The other thing I wanted to talk about is safety. Of course, there's benefits to having a bike lane for bicyclists, but having that center turn lane, I think, in many ways is underappreciated. The report does get into specifics about rear-end collisions, but there are different types of collisions that also occur when there is not a center turn lane. So if you dive into the data for Glen Oaks, a lot of the collisions that occur are also the side swipes, which is the image that you're seeing in the middle. And then the broadsides are very common on streets that look like Glen Oaks, which is 2 lanes in each direction and does not have a center turn lane. So one of the things I'd like to recommend is that you look into a 10-year study when you're doing outreach to the community, so we get a fuller picture of the crash data. And the 5 years, 3 of those 5 years are pandemic years. I think in the report it showed there were 0 rear ends in 2020. That also happens to be a year when there was not much activity on our streets. So I ask that we move to 10 years instead of 5. Next slide. I'm excited also to see that the report shows that cut-through traffic will move to the freeway. The Ross Moines community has consistently been asking for this type of treatment for a very long time. The only thing that I'm slightly concerned about this visual, if we were to display it to the community, is that additional traffic on Dryden and Stalker. The raw numbers show that it's maybe 5 to 10 cars during peak periods. So even though it shows that the hue is slightly more orange or slightly more red, I just want to make sure that we're not alarming the community by suggesting we're going to see an increase in traffic, when in reality we're expecting 5 to 10 cars. So I want to make that distinction to the commission and to the community. Next slide. And so I wanted to just list out some recommendations that Walk by Glendale has. I think we're covering the first piece that was clarified by recommending alternative 3. I would also like to see a staff recommendation. I know that the consultant is recommending alternative 3, but I want to make sure that staff also suggests that as part of their outreach. For those that were around during the La Crescenta project, we were able to do 15 or so community meetings. That stretched out over a year or so. That project from start to finish lasted about 5 years, or 4 years, I should say. And I'm very concerned that if we were to do an outreach similar to that we're starting to look into that type of timeline. And I think we can do very targeted precision outreach to get the same effect. I do suggest a walk audit. We did that for the North Brand project, and it was very effective in showing people what the street looks like. And there's a very cool brewery on Glen Oaks called We're Pouring. They have a great parking lot. You can host a community meeting there. I mentioned the 10-year data, not only rear ends, but as I mentioned, the center turn lane provides lots of benefits, such as reducing the incidence of side swipes and broadside collisions. I think that should be mentioned as part of our narrative. And then the last piece, it's a tiny bit, but the section between Brand and Louise on the south side or the eastbound side, there's no parking there. It's all red curb. So I ask that instead of doing a standard bike lane, that we extend that protected bike lane through to Louise in the eastbound direction at least. And then the last thing I'll say about protected bike lanes, my hope is that we are exploring some more robust treatments other than plastic bollards, whether they're wheel stops, rubber, or concrete, something that has a little bit more oomph to it that will prevent collisions with bicyclists if we're gonna go the protected bike lane route. I work for the city of LA at LADOT, and that is our default treatment, is to put in those plastic bollards, but I'm asking here in the city of Glendale, we can do better. Don't tell my bosses, but that's what we're advocating for here in the city as far as protected bike lanes go. So I'll leave it at that. Happy to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Clem?
Hi, thank you very much for being here tonight, for all of the work you're doing in our city. My name is Amy Clem. I've been a resident for 26 years in Glendale, and I happen to be one of the neighbors that uses that cut through. And one of the things I would like to say about it is I often think three things when I'm going through that neighborhood. One is this is such a cute neighborhood. It's so cute. Two, it's very busy. And three, I'm glad I don't have a house on this street. So I'm in support of all the options that add the most protected bike lanes that we can have, and to help reduce the cut-through problems that this neighborhood faces, and also to encourage our kids and our adults to ride more to their destinations rather than drive. I think in 10 years, we would see a huge change in how people are using our streets if we think forward now and start adding those protected lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops, excuse me. Next up, Regina Joy Alcazar, followed by Lyndon De La Torre.
Hello. Good evening, Commissioners. Regina Joy Alcazar. I grew up in Glendale. I am also raising my son here. We used to live on Dryden for a few years. I also serve on the Parks and Community Services Commission, which we had a meeting earlier today. So actually, first off, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff for adjusting the pedestrian signals in downtown Glendale. They're awesome. I feel a lot safer knowing that I'm not going to be, potentially hit by a car turning left or right. So thank you. So for item 6A, I just want to say I'm fully in support of alternative 3 for partial protected bike lanes. I think if they can be entirely protected, I would 100% support that. My close family friend actually grew up at one of the few residential properties located on this stretch. It might be the only residential property on this stretch. And her older parents still live there today. By now, they are very used to hearing traffic and street racing noises, as others mentioned, cars peeling off, loud mufflers, switching gears, quote unquote, at least every other night. So she is now a very heavy sleeper. And I do think that Class 2 bike lanes are insufficient, particularly along a high traffic and wide corridor like Glen Oaks. They do add, a separate bike lane, but we all know that Glendale drivers especially continue to veer in and out of unprotected bike lanes and sharrows to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. And the option for the partial protected bike lanes with alternative 3 is the only option that will design bike lanes that are safe for families in the adjacent neighborhoods to use them to get to Fremont Park, for example, that's nearby, which is actually starting a full renovation later this year. And wouldn't it be nice if they can get there on their bike safely? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Lyndon De La Torre.
Hello. Hi, my name is Lyndon De La Torre. I'm here to voice my support for Alternative 3. I live near the intersection of Glen Oaks and Central, and I often use Glen Oaks to actually go to downtown Burbank, actually, to shop, eat, and basically just hang around. I rarely use Glen Oaks eastward of Central due to the lack of bike lanes, even though there are places that I also want to go and are much closer to where I live. I'm not too keen on using the Sharrows when people are speeding down Glen Oaks. That's me. So the bike lanes not only traffic calm the streets, but also give more viable way for me and other bikers to get to places. The bike lane also connects to the nearby Central Avenue bike lanes, which I use to bike to work. If you support Alternative 3, you will create strong bones for Glendale's bike network. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Pardon me. That is it for the speaker cards that I have. Okay, we have a few more, 4 more to be exact. The first person is Mike Borisov, followed by Kara Sergio.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mike Borisov. I'm a local student here at Glen Oaks Community College and an avid supporter of biking, and I've been so since joining the Sustainability Commission. I'm one of the student commissioners there, and it's really opened my eyes to how there could be an alternative to biking in the future, like one of the commentators said. And with that, I ask that you please consider support for Alternative 3 protected bike lanes. The introduction of these bike lanes will connect to an incoming bike lane on Glen Oaks and Brand, which will start to build a network that is effective and safe for new people starting to bike, including people like me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cards. Good evening, everyone, members of the Transportation and Parking Commission. Happy summer. We're finally having some sun. And I also wanted to just acknowledge Mr. Imrani and Mr. Casanova for all the hard work that you've been doing and for being an open line of communication for all of us. My name is Kara Sergio, and I've been an active and engaged resident of Glendale and in the Ross Moines neighborhood since 2001. I live in the segment east of Geneva and Glen Oaks that heads into the narrowing street of Ethel down to Mountain. Over the past 14 years, I have served as a dedicated advocate, ally, and Safe Routes to School consultant working to improve street safety for pedestrians and bicyclists here in Glendale and throughout several other communities in Southern California, so I'm well versed in the different safety measures. I was also around when the 2012 Bicycle Transportation Plan was adopted, and I've been waiting and hoping for safe bike lanes to be installed on Glen Oaks. 11 years have passed. The speeding cut through traffic and the number of crashes, even though it's just for that 5-year period, still seems pretty unacceptable to me for a small residential neighborhood. And I think now is the time for us to implement these new lanes. More and more people are buying e-bikes and trying out alternative transportations, and the safer situations that we can have to support that, the better. And so I'm strongly here to urge you to vote in favor of Alternative 3 so that we have the most protection as we can between Geneva all the way to Central. Thank you.
Thank you. Next couple speakers, Martha Sensel and Matthew Taylor.
Good evening, Martha Sensel. I've been a resident of Glendale for nearly 25 years. I'm an avid cyclist and very experienced cyclist. And even with that, I avoid Glen Oaks as much as possible because of the lack of safety, the lack of bike lanes in both directions. And I want to echo, I'm very excited to see this coming forward. I think Alternative 3 is definitely the way to go. As others have said, Sharrows are useless. And I just want to echo what several others have said, it's been 10 years since this was recommended, and I would be very concerned if it takes 5 years to go through more outreach to get this going. It needs to be done now. And I'll just end with the phrase, if you build it, they will come. It will encourage people to ride if there's a safe place to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Matthew Taylor. I've lived in Glendale for about 8 years now. A good chunk of that time was actually not in the Ross Moines neighborhood, but on near where Dryden and Central meet. So I lived in that area for quite a while. I try to bike as much as I can, to avoid driving. And I have to agree with everyone else that's commented. Glen Oaks really is a barrier to biking around Glendale. In addition to the lack of connected bike lanes around the city. I wanted to reiterate what everyone else has been saying about how sharrows basically do nothing. I also wanted to add my support to the idea that for the Class 4 bike lanes in Alternative 3, which Alternative 3 obviously is the one that I'm supporting, for the Class 4 bike lanes, as was mentioned, it really should be metal bollards or real bollards or concrete separating the bike lanes, because the plastic bollards really won't provide much protection in those lanes. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the Class 2 lanes that'll be going between Geneva and Brand if you go with alternatives 2 and 3. I'm obviously not a traffic engineer, but if the road is wide enough for there to be parking and then a painted bike lane, I would hope that it'd be possible for that bike lane to go on the other side of the parking, keep the street the same width, and have the parking protect that bike lane. Obviously, like I said, not a traffic engineer, but I would hope that would be something that could be considered if it can't be a fully, separated bike lane with bollards. And then the last question I had is along the whole stretch. I would love to see exactly what the designs are for when right turn lanes go through onto off of Glen Oaks. I've seen a lot of instances, driving around, the right turn lanes for cars literally go through the bike lanes, and I would very much prefer that to not be the case moving forward. For possible inspiration, I would recommend looking at what are called Dutch bulb outs at intersections for bikes to continue a little head into the intersection so they don't have to cross through right turn lanes with cars. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 6 callers. Alex, you're on the air. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Alex. I live here in Glendale. I've been here for, it's like a decade now. I live near Duran and Glendale Avenue, so just kind of south of this project. And I love riding my bike to the gym, to grocery stores, to run everyday errands. But there's one grocery store I never get to go to on my bike, which is Trader Joe's. It's up there on Glen Oaks, and it's just such a nightmare trying to compete with traffic, trying to get from my home to Trader Joe's. Also, there's Kaiser Permanente further down the road, I think beyond the scope of this project, but bike lanes would get me quite a bit further that way, which is where I do all my primary health care. And I just think, as somebody who loves not getting in my car, who loves that in a lot of Glendale, in these neighborhoods, I can just ride my bike. It would be so great to have access to this main road with so many businesses and services on it. So I fully support Alternative 3 and would like to see as much protected bike lanes as possible in this area. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paul Robinov, you're on the air. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, commission members and staff. This is Paul Rabinov. I'm calling in favor of alternatives 2 and 3 and in opposition to alternative 1. If any of you are interested in finding out why alternative 1 is useless, I'd be willing to meet with you at the corner of Glen Oaks and Pacific Avenue and travel eastbound on bicycle so you can have the experience of what that does or does not do. Speaking of Pacific, the only aspect of this that I would like to see if it could be considered is to continue what you're looking at doing all the way over to Pacific Avenue. Those sharrows on Glen Oaks traveling eastbound begin at Pacific and then travel through. So essentially, if this is what we're going to have, we're still going to have that one large block which does not connect with the bike lanes that commence at Glen Oaks Boulevard and Pacific and head west. So if there's any way to consider having that included in this, I'd be even more in favor of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julia Kobe, you're on the air. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Julia Kobe, and I have been a Glendale resident for 6 years. I am calling in to support the study recommendation of protected and dedicated bike lanes on Glen Oaks. My husband and I got into e-biking during the pandemic, and biking is now our preferred mode of transportation with our young son. We would like to see the bike network in Glendale expanded and feel strongly that protected or dedicated bike lanes are the safest way to ride on the street with cars. Sharrows are just too risky. Per the study presented by the city, the impact to traffic is minimal, but the impact to bike safety and our growing bike network in Glendale is huge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Don, you're on the air. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Don. I am a lifelong resident of Glendale. That is 68 years. I'm up here in the La Crescenta area. I am at near Montrose Avenue, a block lower. This is where they're going to put in a bike lane from Montrose to Verdugo, down by the golf course. As far as outreach, we received zero outreach in my neighborhood. We had a mailing in February of 2022 that mentioned a bike feature. A year later, the city council had already voted to remove a lane. And the vast majority of people here are not aware of it. They won't be aware of it until it's removed. So people that get involved, this is the second time I've gone on one of these. They know about it, or if you read the paper. The vast majority don't. They had outreach to bicycle groups, to some small community organizations up here. But if you didn't have that, you're out of luck. And if the people don't want it, it falls on deaf ears. And I can hear from the speakers tonight. These are the people that are involved. So it's kind of like an echo chamber. I might be the only voice that's telling you this. But I actually went to a meeting, and the last mailing didn't even say they were eliminating a lane. They said bike lane. And I asked Yazdan Emrani, the director of Public Works. I said, will the final mailing say they're eliminating a lane? He told me no. To me, that's not right. That's, in a sense, not giving the full information is dishonest. I understand there is free money from the gas tax we're already paying for, but it shouldn't be used to eliminate lanes for drivers. I see a future where they're building like crazy down there, and you're just going to have congestion. Everybody can't get around on a bus or a bike, but I understand Glen Oaks is another story. There's way too much speeding, but up here even, they have the option of lowering the speed limit on La Crescenta and enforcing. That's my take on this. But for this to be really pushed this strongly, I think is a mistake, because as far as up here, if you build it, they won't come. For every bicycle I see 1,000 cars. And I pulled out on Foothill today up at Ralph's, and it's like 5 p.m. I had to wait quite a while. If that goes to because they're eyeballing Foothill for the same thing. If that goes down and loses a lane, when the 210 gets shut down, it's going to be a nightmare. So I think actually we should slow down on this and take a good look at it. But you're not hearing from the vast majority of the population. It should be a mailing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Edward Gonzalez, you're on the air. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Edward Gonzalez. I'm a resident of neighboring La Crescenta.
And I use my e-bike to get around, and I commute to work on my e-bike. I run errands on my e-bike and my regular bikes as well. And in many places, it's certainly an act that feels like it's more dangerous than it should be. And considering that I just had my newborn son, and I'd like to run these errands with him and also take him to daycare, the network in the area and connected cities, and especially Glendale, because there's so many errands that we can run there, is vitally important to myself, to my son and my wife, who I'd like to continue running these errands with. And we are a one-car family because the bike works for me and my family. And the connectivity, and especially in the Glen Oaks area, to really important amenities and shops is a big part of that network. So I just wanted to highlight the importance of that and the growing bike network in the area. We've supported the bike lanes on La Quinta Avenue and the Verdugo Hills area, and it's an important aspect of how I get around. So I just wanted to make sure that myself and other families have the opportunity to do that safely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kari Field, you're on the air. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Carrie Field. I'm a Glendale resident and member of Drive Safe Glendale. I have 2 kids who bike to GUSD schools. One of them will start driving themselves soon. I'm calling in support of Alternative 3 with Class 4 bike lanes for the street, bike, pedestrian, and vehicle safety improvement they will provide, along with helping the climate crisis. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.
Colleen Novak, you're on the air. You have 3 minutes. Colleen Novak, you're on the air. There are no more callers.
Thank you. Let's see. So we have heard from members of the public calling in and in person. On the agenda, the next point is to call a motion and discuss feedback. So I think the discussion point of clarification, can we discuss before there's a motion, or the motion is to discuss?
The motion will reflect your discussions and recommendations. It would be fine to wrap up with that once you've completed.
Excellent. With that, I'm happy to open the floor to any of my commissioners that have comments or questions based on some of the deliberation, based on the comments that we heard. Excellent. Please.
Mr. Casanova, you just mentioned about traffic stress and cut-through traffic through Glen Oaks Boulevard. By putting option number 3, what happens to that traffic? Where do they go? What happens to that?
Yes, Chairperson Bonstein, members of the Commission, and Commissioner Ordobejian. I believe you mentioned level of traffic stress, and that's a relative term for the bicyclist. Just to clarify, you're referring to level of service for the traffic flow? Is that
Yes,
what
for the traffic, for the cars, basically.
Okay.
I mean,
Sure. So what the study evaluated and found is it evaluated each of the signalized intersections along the corridor. And what it found is that the level of service is there's going to be very, very little change. And level of service reflects how well the intersections operate. Most of the intersections currently operate at level of service A or B. and would continue to operate at those levels even with the road repurposing and the reduction in lanes.
Okay, that brings to another question. The Glen Oaks Boulevard is about 56 feet, if I'm not mistaken. That's what you mentioned at part of it, correct?
Correct. The section between Louise and Brand is 56,
So
and then Geneva to Louise
the
is
parked
60.
cars, I mean, as you all know, there's no parking to be had at that place. So if the parked cars take about like 6 or 7 feet, and protective bike lane is going to take another 11, correct?
Are you referring to the section between Geneva and Brand?
Entire place. I mean, because we go from 60 feet to 56 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take 6 feet and then 11 feet, that makes it 17 feet. If you divide it in half, so for the cars to drive there, they only have about 13 feet of maneuverability, correct?
The alternative 3, what it proposes in the section between Geneva and Brand are class 2 bicycle lanes without the buffer. So it would be a 6-foot wide bicycle lane only without the buffer. West of Brand to Central, it's wider, so it would include a buffer area.
Okay, and then can you just explain when you mention buffer, what are they, how tall they are, and how much space do they take, and what are they made of? Could car basically hit them and then roll over to the neighboring houses or businesses? Is that a possibility?
The buffer areas can vary in width. They could be as low as 2 foot wide and can range up to 4 to 6 feet, depending on how much width you have to buffer. The raised elements that have been used are typically the plastic traffic bollards that are epoxied to the pavement. And those, the ones that have been selected on recent designs, at least that we're working on, are rated to be impacted at up to 65 miles per hour and sustain those hits and remain in place.
And the last question would be, what happens when those buffer ends? What happens to our bicyclists? Do they go back, or how they can continue on to their journey, going on to, let's say, to Pacific and furthermore?
Commissioner, to begin, if I may answer that question. So, as you know, City of Glendale is an older city. And so the bike lanes weren't designed for the when it was developed. So this is a new concept that we're introducing, basically trying to retrofit the streets with bike lanes where we can. So this started with the 2012 Bicycle Transportation Plan, and we've designed, when I say we, Public Works Department has now completed designing, based on the BTP 2012, about 90 or 90% plus of the recommendations of the BTP. There's a new study underway to update the Bicycle Transportation Plan of 2012 that's being undertaken by the Community Development Department. That has started, and it's looking to be done or won't be completed probably for another year. That is going to take a holistic look at all the streets within Glendale and then make recommendations for these different types of bicycle lanes where they're, basically pick up where 2012 BTP stopped and then take that to its completion. What we do is basically when we do a capital improvement program for any streets within the city, we look at the possibility of adding bike lanes if there's enough real estate and if there's enough, as you noted, width within the street so that we can safely install either a class 2 bike lane or protected bike lane. So we do it on a case-by-case basis, but holistically that's going to be part of the updated Bicycle Transportation Plan, which will be released next year.
And I just want last questions. I'm a huge fan of outreach, and unfortunately, I haven't seen that done right with City of Glendale staff. The outreach is no good at all. So I want to know, what is your plan, and how are you planning on reaching out to those neighborhoods that's going to get impacted? And are we going to have, what are the plans, and how are you going to approach to it?
Commissioner Ordobegian, well, I guess depending on what you heard tonight, either we did a lot of outreach or we didn't do enough outreach, so we must be doing something right. But basically, the outreach that was mentioned that we did for La Crescenta, we had a community meeting, and then we went to council, and the council asked us to expand our outreach. So we started in February of last year, and we did outreach over several months. It wasn't several years that was mentioned, it was several months. When we finished the outreach, basically we made our recommendation, brought it back to council, and the council adopted the alternative of reducing it, one lane on each side, and putting that center median lane and adding the bicycle lanes. With this project, we're also planning on doing a community outreach and engage the stakeholders and the businesses, and make sure everybody that's going to be impacted in that corridor is aware of it. However, we can only do so much. I mean, we're going to send out the mailers, we're going to have the engagement, and spread the word as much as possible, and hope that we can reach at least the majority of the residents.
10 people responding is not enough. So if you do get the outreach and you only get 20 or 30 or 40 people responding, it's not acceptable. Thank you.
Other comments?
I do not have a question, but I have a comment. I've been involved with micromobility sharing startups since 2020. And in order to promote the bike riding and healthy lifestyle we've been doing, biking, we on a weekly basis since 2020. And then we stopped it in 2021, mid-2021, because, the COVID was over, we started, not over, but it was much reduced, we started, and then we stopped it in mid-2021 because the amount of people who were participating in the beginning and how rapidly it was reducing, it was very big. Because people were not feeling safe to ride. We were riding from 1377, starting from 1377 East Colorado to Brent Library. And people just were not feeling safe. I'm not an active cyclist, but I want to be one. And unfortunately, the city that I am completely in love with is not offering the proper infrastructure to do so. And I'm really hoping that one day it's actually going to be a reality. And I also have lived until April of last year, I've been living on Louise Street, Louise and Glenox, 930 North Louise. So I'm very, very familiar with the business of the street, the intersection, the how cars speed usually. It's actually very famous Glenox of speeding. So I completely feel the people who are worried about the safety of the cyclists during in that area. So I'm completely for the alternative 3. I agree with Commissioner Ordobegian about the outreach. Yes, of course, I would love to hear the feedback of all the people. Unfortunately, majority are not very responsive and they're not willing to give feedbacks. But yes, of course, there should be an outreach conducted. And if there's anything that we can help, I'm willing to help. I have a marketing company and I'm willing to provide proper tools, everything for the outreach. But while it may not be the idea of having bicycle infrastructure and the implementation of that, it may diverge from the preferences of the car drivers. There should be bike lanes because supporting cyclist safety is actually vital for long-term sustainable development. And by doing so, we create foundation to promote the healthier lifestyle, and definitely it's going to reduce traffic congestion and it addresses also the environmental concerns. So I'm looking forward to seeing that implemented to benefit the current and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to just bring up, so we had one clear call in opposition earlier, and this idea that this kind of infrastructure is somehow a zero-sum situation where something is lost by drivers as opposed to people using other forms of transportation. I just want to, again, confirm with the experts we have here that in this situation, this area where we're going to be converting 4 travel lanes into 2 travel lanes with a continuous turn lane, we're not going to be seeing a significant loss in level of service, right? That means cars will not be impeded in it in any significant way, correct?
Yes, Chairperson Bonstein, members of the commission, Commissioner Lester, that is correct, especially at the signalized intersections that were evaluated. We see the levels of service being minimally impacted. Within the street segments in between, there will be a drop in level of service, but we think that that would add to that benefit of reduction in cut-through traffic through the neighborhood.
Thank you. Yeah. On to a couple of comments. I'd like to commend staff for working on this, adding this missing part from the bike plan, and also trying to incorporate the reduction in cut-through traffic in the Ross Moines neighborhood. Kind of working with these together is I think it's kind of an ideal way to approach the situation. In my opinion, the amount of data analysis that was done on this was really quite extensive and impressive. I actually read the consultant report, not just the staff report, and which I might note that the consultant's report actually did clearly specify alternative 3 as a preferred alternative. I think we heard one comment earlier that it would be good to potentially advance a preferred alternative. I think we've heard quite a bit of support for alternative 3, which I also support. So I think some of the, this is also important that when it comes to this section between Central and Brand, this idea of physical protection really matters. That section has very few driveways or anything that would cause anyone to slow down, so it's just kind of like a straight racetrack kind of section. So the idea of some kind of like parking blocks or rubber parking blocks or something physical protecting those buffered lanes in alternative 3, I think we heard one suggestion. I support that idea. One question. One commenter asked about the possibility of parking protected lanes east of Brand Boulevard now, and is there any possibility of that based on the measurements, or was that ruled out based on the road measurements?
Yes, Commissioner Lester, we would not be able to fit in the curb running bike lanes, because once you go curb running, then there needs to be a 3-foot buffer between the bicycle lane and the parked cars to protect them from a door zone. So if we put them on the traffic side, you don't need that buffer zone, but if you put them on the curb side, you do, which means we do not have enough street width to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I would look for support on the commission for potentially advancing a recommendation to continue the protected lane in the section with no parking, which is south side of Glen Oaks to the east in the block east of Brand Boulevard, as a possibility. Also, there was also the issue of the gap. So the BRT plan, which I'm actually not clear on the timeline for the BRT plan, which is going to have extensive bike facilities on it on the west side of Pacific, but the section between Pacific and Central is, it's a gap that's going to be left here. Really would like to see, particularly if the time frame is going to be a very long time before the BRT comes, to see about including that section within this proposal potentially. Let me just do
Could you repeat what section is that?
That is it's between Pacific and Central. Glen Oaks between Pacific and Central. It's just a gap that will be conspicuous if this excellent project goes forward. So let's see. Those are my questions and comments for now. Again, I just would like to say thanks. I think this is great. It deals with multiple issues, and so far I've heard a lot of support. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I have several questions. Just for clarification's sake, my office is actually on the corner of Glen Oaks and Isabel, so I'm very familiar with this stretch, and I've lived in Glendale for 34 years now, and so I'm really familiar with Glen Oaks and this stretch. But I did have some questions about the report. On page 12 of the slide, if we can go back to that. So how is this calculated in terms of these projections, in terms of the delay that it would have? How does that get calculated?
Yes, Commissioner Marian, good to meet you, by the way.
It's a
I don't
pleasure.
think we've met before. The way this is calculated, at each of the signalized intersections, there are turning movement traffic counts done during the peak traffic hours. So that information is input into a traffic model called Synchro, and it's calculated for each of the peak hours, and it gives us the delay and an equivalent level of service. So one might think, why are we getting similar levels of service if we're reducing a lane? In the case of these intersections, what's helping is the integrating the left turn channelization. Because currently we've seen Glen Oaks Boulevard that the number one lane, when a left turner gets into the left lane, you have a lot of weaving effect. So that weaving effect has an impact on traffic operations, and the model sees that. So when it evaluates the proposed and incorporating that left turn channelization, it also sees the operational benefits at the intersection.
Okay, that makes sense. And the does that algorithm take into account future traffic growth?
In this particular analysis, it did not, because the levels of service were in relatively good shape, so it didn't look out in the 20 or 30-year horizon. And as you may know, that in terms of development, as traffic is looked at in the future, there's a big focus right now on vehicle miles traveled. So those models tend to look out in the future and take into account all the land use, as well as the changes in more active modes of transportation and such.
Excellent, thank you. If we can move to page 14 real quick. Speaking of vehicle miles traveled.
Sorry, what?
14. So there's an actual increase in the Ross Moines neighborhood. And would you explain the difference between the Ross Moines neighborhood and the Glen Oaks Boulevard, portion here? I think one of the issues that, I had been following as I was doing my due diligence was the idea of the neighborhood wanting to decrease the number of vehicle miles traveled through their neighborhood, and yet this shows an actual increase in that. Would you mind providing some context for me for that, please?
Certainly, Commissioner Marian. These are high-level traffic models, and essentially what it'll see is there's a lane reduction on Glen Oaks Boulevard, anticipates the rather large reduction of VMT, vehicle miles traveled, on Glen Oaks. And it also shows, if we look down at the remainder of City of Glendale, some increase as traffic moves towards those more streamlined roadways that have higher capacity, like the freeway, right? But it also sees that there could be some residual, where you have Glen Oaks Boulevard, and there may be traffic that says, well, where am I going? Senses a little bit of friction and may seek another route. So I think that's what the model looks at. But in realistic terms, I think what we see in the Ross Moines area is, other than Glen Oaks, we don't see any other more attractive roadways that have more traffic lanes that could potentially attract more of that traffic. So really, Glen Oaks, what is that street currently? With the roadway repurposing and the reduction in VMT on there and the increase in VMT towards the freeway, we think that those numbers that are shown in the model are shown relatively low, and may not even be noticeable, really.
And if I may add, Commissioner Amirian, what this report doesn't take into account, but we're doing independently, is we're also doing traffic calming measures for the Ross Moines neighborhood independently. So that involves also, we have some speed humps there that we're raising their height by at least an inch. And we're putting we're talking to the residents about adding some rumble strips basically before these speed humps. So those also usually have a tendency to, over time, reduce the the traffic that doesn't live on, in that area. So this just looks at this traffic study, but behind the scenes, or in addition, we're also looking at traffic calming measures that should reduce the cut-through traffic through Ross Moines.
Okay. Yeah, because what I imagine you'd want to avoid is potentially driving the traffic north, onto like Dryden, and just turning that into the through. Yeah, it's just one block further up. If we can go to slide 16. Would you explain this level of traffic stress, how that's determined? I mean, what are there metrics that are used? Are people interviewed? Is it like, because this is the first time I've seen it or heard of it, and so I'm just not clear on how that's calculated. I'm hearing from a lot of people, for example, in the public, that sharrows do nothing. And so it's like, well, why were they put in the first place? So I'm just trying to figure out how this was, how that you come to that rating.
Yeah. So thank you, Commissioner Marion. And so there isn't a specific scientific methodology to do it where you actually measure something and it gives you the stress. It's reviewing the facilities that the bicyclist would be riding their bicycle on. So again, they wanted to come up with some sort of gauge to give an indication of what that comfort factor is for the bicyclist. So comfort can be different for different people, right? So what this takes into account is really it just gives some range so that someone can have an understanding, well, how much better can it be for a bicyclist to put in a class 4 facility, for example, versus a sharrow. And I think I went over the ranges where level of traffic stress 1 would be the most ideal, like a bike path where there isn't any vehicular traffic on it. A level of traffic stress 5 would be more activity, higher traffic volume, more traffic lanes, more driveways. And we see that on the results, where in the no-build alternative currently with Glen Oaks Boulevard with the sharrows, just the regular white sharrows, there's a level of traffic stress 4. That's pretty high up there. That's almost the worst on the list. Whereas we see the best alternative, alternative 3, it drops down that level of traffic stress to a 2, showing that it may not be like a bike path, but it does provide a dedicated lane and more comfort to the bicyclists.
But so what I'm hearing you say is that's just basically model that's based upon the idea of you have this level of protected lane, and it, depending on the traffic in that area, you get this number, it spits out this number. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, there's a high amount of the engineering judgment used in coming up with these level of traffic stress. In fact, in the industry right now, there's two rating levels, 1 through 4 and 1 through 5. So they found that the 1 through 4 just didn't provide that enough of a range to get that understanding what that comfort level was. So in this study, we used a more conservative one, which added that additional level of traffic stress.
Got it. Thank you. Slide 17, I just have a couple more. I'm just trying to make sure that I have a complete understanding of how this report was, So this, it looks like they projected 20 years of potential future collisions. How is that calculated, especially if increase in traffic is not taken into account?
Can you identify which area you're referring to?
So there's an
Commissioner?
avoided collision benefit that's been calculated, and that number is that's a significant number. So if we look at the cost that was mentioned, depending on which, I read the report, it was like, $235,000 if it was, fully protected level 4, and then you have this avoided collision benefit that's calculated. How is that avoided collision benefit calculated? How are they projecting avoided collisions?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Marion. What this benefit cost ratio analysis does, it looks at 20 years out in terms of collisions. So it looks at the collision data that we have available, which it reviewed the last 5 years, and it essentially extrapolates that out to a 20-year period. And it looks at the potential cost of the project and makes that direct comparison. So in answer to your question, how does it forecast out the collisions? I believe that's the question. It looks at the existing collision data and extrapolates that out. So it assumes that we're going to have the same collision patterns that we've seen in the last 5 years if you don't make that change over the next 20. And if you do make that change, there's...
How is that reduction calculated?
Yeah, so there is a methodology to do it that the consultant used generally. I like to refer to the Caltrans local transportation plan or local roadway safety plan. And they generally show for the road repurposing projects of this type, there will be a 30% reduction in collisions across the board for all collision types. Again, it could be side swipes, right angle, rear end. It applies to all collision types and a 30% reduction. And that's a good rule of thumb number that Caltrans has a study to back up with.
Excellent. Police intervention, there's been mentions of street racing or speeding on Glen Oaks, and that's been something that's, if you've lived in Glendale long enough, we've lived with significantly. How are the police being leveraged, especially with our new chief that's in order to help mitigate any of these issues? Has there been any police intervention in terms of, number one, ensuring that this section is being patrolled properly? Number two, especially with the Sharrows, that the vehicles are treating those cyclists in the manner consistent with the law. Is that happening?
Yes, Commissioner Marion, Public Works generally has very close contact with police, especially in their traffic section with the traffic lieutenant, but as well as the chief. We are aware of several programs that they had, as you mentioned, on Glen Oaks Boulevard to address speeding. During COVID, I know we had a big spike in speeding because of the lower amount of traffic. We work with the department as well on their efforts on Glen Oaks Boulevard. What we're anticipating for this project, again, we're here for feedback from the Transportation and Parking Commission, and in the next steps with the outreach, that also includes internal stakeholders such as police and fire. So I think at that time, that's when we're really going to get the bulk of their input as it relates specifically to the project we're working on in this section of Glen Oaks.
Excellent. Thank you. Just some comments. First of all, I really appreciate the welcome and humoring me, asking some questions as I kind of get my feet wet here. Look, I mean, I've got kids, and they like to ride their bikes, and I want safe streets, and I drive those streets on a daily basis. I, for one, also am one of those drivers that if I do see a cyclist, I give them wide berth because I have some empathy, but it just does sound like that cyclists aren't feeling that, especially the Sharrows on Glen Oaks. I understand that completely. Anytime we talk about eliminating lanes from traffic, that's a significant step that is being suggested and undertaken. And so as a person who really looks at, the strength of the data that I'm looking at, the support for removing a traffic lane, especially considering that, the city is going to continue to grow. And I do understand that we're trying to mitigate driving. I just know that even with mitigation of driving, most people tend to drive vehicles. And so I'm uncomfortable having come in my first meeting, and this feels like a huge responsibility in terms of giving an opinion on this. Having read through this report, it was, 150 plus pages. Yeah. And so these questions about how these calculations occurred, they're not, that methodology is not explained anywhere in this report. And so when you talk about removing the lanes, if you want to do something without removing a lane, I'm in support. That section between, you're talking about Glen Oaks, the section between Brand and Central, where no lanes would be removed, I'm in full support of that. You can narrow those lanes a little bit. It'll slow things down, but it's not going to remove a lane completely. That's good. People will pay more attention. Removing lanes completely from a section, even though the report shows at the signals that there's no considerable loss of service impact, you did mention that between the signals that there would be an effect. And so I'm not clear on what that effect is. I'm not clear on what's going to happen over the next 5 years or 10 years on that road where I have my office. I share that office with State Senator Anthony Portantino. I know he's a big cyclist. I see him with his bike all the time. But if you all of a sudden eliminate that lane, a lane on Glen Oaks, I don't know what it does based upon this in those middle sections. And I don't feel very comfortable saying I'm gung-ho supporting removing a traffic lane. So for me, just to talk it out so that you understand, I would be in support of that alternative 3 for the section between Brand and Central, because it wouldn't involve removing a lane. In fact, that's a great solution. Everything east of that, even extending that lane potentially on the south side, I believe, which is the place where there's no parking allowed, up until I don't remember the street. I'd support that too. But removing the lane, I just urge. I'm 100% in support of communities, being safe places for their families and kids. But removing traffic lanes is a really, really impactful step. And until I feel comfortable with where the data is coming, there's been no calculation of future traffic growth. I'm going to have a tough time supporting removing that lane. I will support the enhanced Sharrow. I know you mentioned that the Sharrows don't do anything. It looks like based upon the LTS, it does make it a little bit more comfortable. And I don't know if there are any other solutions that might help with that. But I wouldn't be able to support today, removing a lane on Glen Oaks. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. This is Shauna Bonston, and some comments, but maybe just continuing on the comment that you made, can you clarify where a lane is removed? For the length of it, is it just east of Brand?
Yes, Chairperson Bonstein, members of the commission, the lane reduction or lane repurposing, if you want to call it, is on Glen Oaks between Geneva and Brand. And between Brand and Central, traffic lanes still remain at 3 in each direction.
Okay, thank you. In no particular order, I'll go through some of my comments. Let me actually start first with the staff report, which I found very well written and thorough, and I really appreciated the data despite it being long. I think we are appreciative of the information. I would also say that just on the comment of outreach, I think it appears that outreach has been well done because of the number of people, and I'm only comparing that to some of our other items that sometimes other days that we don't have as many people. I think another interesting reflection that I had a moment ago, I can't call my own reflection interesting, something that occurred to me that is a little different. I work for the city of Los Angeles, and I know that a lot of the outreach that we have will happen prior to a commission meeting. So what I'm kind of realizing is the structure is a little bit different, whereas a lot of what you bring to us is a staff, analysis and kind of the first step of us giving a recommendation that then it proceeds to a lot more of the outreach phase. And it took a moment for me to kind of think that through, that it's an adjustment. So we might always at this moment be seeing less outreach than we might otherwise be used to, because it's still fairly beginning in the process. And that's not to say that I think there's a lot of collective belief in the value of outreach, and maybe we can continue to hear kind of those updates on exactly what comes of it, the types of meetings, and encouraging staff to be creative and innovative in how they're reaching people at their place. I think the overwhelming support for Alternative 3 even is incredibly compelling. It was compelling to me even prior to that, based on the recommendation of the consultant, but a number of the data points as well. Even kind of looking at that benefit cost ratio, that does seem like it's a little bit undervalued, maybe is a way to put it, based on the 5 years. Especially if the couple of years was during COVID. I think to the point, one of the points that was raised, wondering if a 10-year analysis is more helpful to really understand the trends. We see this with other types of data in other fields too, that sometimes we're not looking at the last 5 years just because COVID was such an anomaly. I wanted to pick up on, the previous decision, or at least recommendation that the board had in terms of Brand, and really looking at the bike infrastructure connecting there. I think this is an excellent place to continue with that. I wanted to pick up and maybe ask the question about this idea of better bollards. That's the note that I had, the type of infrastructure that looks like for protection. Maybe a question to staff, or what are those options? What is the standard that we have? What is in the toolkit that maybe is less standard but could be exceptionally protective? Yeah, I think that's actually, I'll leave it there with that question, if you don't mind. And then I think we can proceed with our discussion and motion.
May I?
Yes, please.
Just 2 more points about the data. One thing, this may be particularly pertinent regarding going forward with outreach and presentation to council, but there's caveats given with the VMT data that it needs to be super clear. In my mind, it wasn't very clear, but the addition of the continuous turn lane is the reason why there aren't big impacts. And the VMT data doesn't include the effects of that left turn lane. It says several times in the report that they didn't calculate for that. I mean, on my way over here, I actually stopped at Luis and Glen Oaks and just watched the cars going through, and 5:30, you know, it was peak traffic, and there was probably 7 car backups at Luis. So the inside lanes were backed up. So the cars that wanted to go around them had to weave. The cars behind them had to slow down. So the idea of the continuous turn lane is those cars queue in the center and the cars that want to go through. So, I mean, that's my understanding of, like, on a broad level, why this is not a big impact. It's because adding that lane will actually improve the dynamics of the auto congestion on that section. So I also think, you know, there was a bit of a discussion about the avoided collision benefits. And really, like, a point was made earlier about how COVID may affect the term of the data being considered. That really makes a lot of sense to me. Like, there was 0 accidents in these areas for 3 of the years studied out of 5. So that was not really a representative data, you know, collection term. So those two things, I'm, you know, not considering the continuous turn lane, like that heat map, the increase seems to be based on, it's very minor to the point of what, 5 or 10 more cars, and it's basically not including this continuous turn lane. And so I question the meaning of that as a presentation. Like, is it valid, that data, without including the effect of the turn lane? And so those 2 points, I think, in presenting this case are important to clarify, just so as not to be misleading. And then just you know, basic final comment is that, like, the purpose of this is to make people cutting through not go through the neighborhoods, go to the freeway, right? And at the same time, increasing safety. You know, this is a transportation commission. There's more than one mode. We need to look at all the modes and how they're trying to move around the city. And to me, considering how this can affect cut through and increase safety, and it's laid out in numbers how it can clearly do that, makes it a convincing case. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I would actually like to second Commissioner Leslie's comment. And my mom, apparently, she drives every day from Glen Oaks Thompson to Adventist Hospital. And that's where she actually has to stop always, because people just make lefts, and that basically that line already serves as a middle lane. So I'm very familiar with it because of her too. And actually, yeah, before today's meeting, I went with her, and then we actually tried to look around the area and to kind of get familiarized more how the cars behave. So completely agree with that. I just wanted to make that comment. So familiar with an everyday route that goes through the entire Glen Oaks.
Thank you. I guess I'll really add just an additional comment. You know, having listened to your comment too about concerns about removing a travel lane, I was thinking of, and this doesn't apply, this is just a personal anecdote. You know, there were a couple streets when I lived in Silver Lake that ended up having a road diet. And there were streets that I kind of couldn't imagine existing with a single lane. And once the change happened, it surprises me now that there was a different version. Like, I expected such a inconvenience factor, which is also hard to kind of deliberate that in your own mind, like the inconvenience of me kind of cutting through a neighborhood versus the concerns about safety. But I'm sometimes dubious about the concerns being overstated because we do end up adapting. And even to that point about thinking about projections 20 years out, I mean, it's hard. We've talked, and we don't really openly talk about this in this commission, but there are many modes of transportation that are still unfolding. Like, you know, it's like hard to think of like what will 20 years look like when we're looking at flying vehicles is not the right term. I'm suddenly like up here unable to call what is the industry term for it? We all are blanking. Thank you. Autonomous vehicles, but also those that are, you know, not on roads. Thank you. We kept thinking, you know, this is around the corner. So my point being, it's hard to project out 20 years because it seems like in that time frame we will have had so many other problems and solutions come up in the meantime. So that's just another unnecessary but comment. If we're feeling, and I'm looking around, if there's additional comments to be made, it sounds like one. Okay.
If I may just add, you know, I understand this change is inevitable. Instead of fighting it, we need to embrace it. But impacts that it's going to have on the community, it should be taken into account. So again, I'm on a second on the commissioner mentioning taking a lane out of the street will have an immediate impact on the immediate neighborhood vicinity right over there. So what I'm saying is, and from what I hear, any kind of an implementation of these changes will take 5, 10, 15 years to put something in there. What is the least and fastest way of implementing any kind of a safety feature that we can immediately take advantage of? Is Sharrows could be done really fast till we decide what we're going to do with the streets? Is that possible? That we can implement the Sharrows, let's say, a month from now? Let's put the Sharrows in there, and then we'll continue on our discussions, because the way that I hear implementation of taking a lane, putting bollards or all buffers and everything else, it may take. The last one that we had, the commission talked about, was 2012. So that's almost 13 years ago, 12 years ago. So can we put the Sharrows in right now and make sure that, you know, serves a little purpose? And then after that, we'll decide, you know, do we want to move on and put a bollard or like some sort of a buffer in there? Let's see what the impact is. And I think that would be the least amount of expenses that City of Glendale can take right now.
There are Sharrows. There are existing.
Do you mean the enhanced Sharrows? Is that what you're
enhanced Sharrows? Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I think any change is probably going to take some time, just given my experience with the city. Any change, but is removing a lane more onerous? I'm sorry, repurposing, whatever the words are. Is that more onerous in terms of a time constraint than enhanced Sharrows?
Commissioner Amirian, this is the study. This is a study that we brought before the TPC, and we're looking for feedback on which of the alternatives the TPC supports, basically, so we can move forward. This is the first step, as Chair Bonstein also mentioned. Once we have the final recommended alternative that we'll take to the council, then yes, we have to look at financing, we have to look at funding sources, and develop a project accordingly. Depending on, you know, we have other projects also, so this will also be one of the projects in the queue. It's hard to say how long it's going to take. I can tell you it's not going to take 10 years, but it can, you know, anytime when you start a project from inception to completion, from design to end of construction, if funding is available, it can take probably 2 to 3 years on average.
And look, the writing, you know, just not to take time, it's clear that, you know, right now, I mean, the point is to build consensus, and hopefully, as a commission, having had experience on other commissions as well, hopefully have, you know, build a unanimous, you know, decision that everybody can live with. If not, that's okay. It happens. There are disagreements. If it's going to be, you know, it's going to be alternative 3, you know, between Brandon Central with the protected level 4, and then removing the lane east of Glen Oaks to Geneva, I would probably vote against that just because of my discomfort of the data. I would be willing to vote in favor of it if there was an added contingency of going back to whoever produced this report and asking them to consider, have some answers for the data, consider future traffic growth, the impact of this, not just at the lights, but in between the lights, especially since we're going to be removing that lane. Then I'd be willing to support it, and I don't know, Mr. Odebagian, where you stand on that. But at the very least, I think what that does is builds a unanimous consensus because we all want the same thing. We want safety. We want in the neighborhoods to have that safety built. I also want in the city of Glendale a practice of not just great, data specificity and looking at this information, because you can't move what you can't measure. I want excellent, top of the class. That's what I would hope for. And so a technical finding that doesn't take into account any type of future traffic growth falls a little bit short of that, in my opinion.
If I can just add one more question. I agree with you. At this point, I cannot vote for option 3. I can't approve of removing a lane right now. I do live in Rossmoyne myself, and I understand I've been there for past 20 years. I've been living in Glendale for 35. So there's got to be other data that we can completely be okay. And as Commissioner Amirian mentioned, we all for safety. I do bike myself and my kids, but I need to get more information. And living in Rossmoyne area, I've never received any kind of a card, any kind of an outreach from City of Glendale mentioning what is it that they're trying to do, and that is unacceptable. We need to find out. You need to do a better job of reaching out to people to find out what they have to say. We're here to elevate everyone, and that's our job. So we need to make sure that everybody understands what's out there for them and what kind of an impact they have, and all of us need to be able to hear them. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
We keep having our last comments. I would just add, this is Shauna Bonston. I hear what you're saying about the data. However, I guess I land on another side of it, which is that I'm not sure what additional data provides and then what to do with that information when we have in front of us safety concerns that are more immediate. I also find it unconscionable that we have a plan that was laid out from 2012. Like, to me, that does seem like there was a process that identified this as a solution, that we're moving forward with implementing that. So it feels a little more baked to me than if it was a brand new proposal. So that's what I feel. A comment or a motion?
I'll make one more comment, which is just there is a lot of data in here. I mean 150 pages, something like that. Studied from multiple viewpoints. One was LOS, level of service. The other was vehicle mile traveled. I mean, it was something like a 1% increase was slated. Is there anything, Mr. Casanova, you can say to defend or clarify data that, I mean, how much more could be studied? To me, this seems like an exhaustive exercise in analyzing this area. Is there anything you can clarify along those lines?
Yes, Commissioner Lester, members of the commission. The traffic study reviewed current traffic patterns, and it also, I mentioned, reviewed VMT. One of the issues in forecasting is that projects are now viewed or evaluated based on the California Environmental Quality Act, based on vehicle miles traveled, right, not level of service. So what we're using level of service is really a gauge to give us a real time of how's it going to operate when we implement it. Forecasting out, because development now is viewed differently, right? Our development is now being developed without having traffic as its main focus. We see higher density development going on with less facilities for vehicles, less encouragement for vehicle growth or dependency on vehicles. So as we look at the traffic models and looking forward, the focus is on VMT. So in forecasting out, we used to follow a plan called the Congestion Management Plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority Metro Congestion Management Plan. So that is still being used, again, as we're using it here, to evaluate traffic operations, but not necessarily in forecasting future traffic conditions, because now there's more of a focus on VMT. So if we try to go through this exercise, we don't have those reference numbers on how much are we going to forecast now, because now the focus is on VMT. And the city currently is going through a revamp of our general plan traffic circulation element. So that's still in the works and being developed. So we don't have that model to potentially look at what the city's growth is going to be in terms of traffic with all this new type of development. So we don't have that disposable at our fingertips right now. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, Chair. Yeah, and I appreciate that clarification, and I completely understand that. That's a much bigger discussion. It doesn't change the fact that the population will continue to grow. I understand the reasons behind CEQA being the kind of the new measurement rather than congestion, but congestion will continue to increase. That's an opportunity to try to change behavior through kind of legislation that's coming down from the state, and that's a much bigger conversation. I'm just saying for the city of Glendale, I understand that you have to follow some of those guidelines, but it would be remiss not to consider that in terms of the community's comfort, especially traffic on a much larger scale. Look, the eventual impact of this stretch from Geneva to Brand on Glen Oaks, it's hard for me to say that it's going to be a life-changing a thing. But if we apply this level of scrutiny to every other project that comes up, then I've got an issue, because it's how we look at these projects on a smaller scale, which this is a relatively small project. When you talk about the miles and miles of road in Glendale, it needs to be considered. Future traffic has to be considered.
I will say, I actually kind of struggled. One of my questions is why we had LOS, given that the measurement is now VMT. I assumed it was just to be kind of a buffer of additional information. Because, again, with CEQA, looking at the impacts, it is only vehicle miles traveled. To, I think, your point, while it might not be a CEQA impact that you can analyze there, it's worthwhile to consider. I don't disagree with that, but I also feel that the comments that we heard today, not yourself excluded, you both have, a value. The location is important to you, but the comments that we heard from the public were so overwhelming in support of Alternative 3. Besides, a single person that seemed far away from the location, we didn't hear concerns about the level of service or the reduction of a traffic lane. So I'm struggling with not moving forward with that, given what was presented to us today and the comments that we heard. And yes, more discussion. No, motion. Yeah. Do it.
Are we making a motion to go with alternative
Someone
three?
can make it, yes. Someone can make a motion.
The motion is not to choose an alternative. The motion is to receive, note, and file the report. You're not officially making a decision as to an alternative. You are making all your comments, and staff will take them, incorporate them, and use them moving forward.
Okay,
Great.
I'll
That-
make a motion to file a note with alternative 3. Okay.
Well, I mean, not for the alternative, to receive, note, and file the report.
Okay.
A second.
Great.
So, Mr. Lightenberg, can you just read the motion so that everybody, the record has a clear understanding?
I would be happy to. This is moved that the June 26, 2023 Transportation and Parking Commission report regarding the Glen Oaks Bicycle Facility Study is hereby received, noted, and filed.
I'll take roll call. Chairperson Bonstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Avagyan,
Yes.
Commissioner Ordubegyan,
That's a no for me.
Commissioner Amirian.
Yes, as to the motion, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Can you clarify the motion?
Clarify the, yeah, so the motion is just to say that we did receive the note, basically. Then it'll be yes.
What is the next item on the agenda?
Item 7, informational report. However, we do not have an informational report.
Very well. What is the next item on the agenda?
Item 8, oral communication. Discussion is limited to item not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. No, I have no.
What is, I'm assuming we're going on to the next item on the agenda because no one has stepped forward to speak.
Item 9, commission staff comments updates. Mr. Imrani would like to make a comment.
Actually, I do not have any comments for the commission unless the commissioners have any comments.
I do not have a comment for you, but I would like to welcome our new commissioner and give you the floor for a minute before we close. If you'd like to give us any information about your background or otherwise provide a speech.
Sure, very quickly, no. Thank you. I think I've said enough, and everybody wants to go home. I look forward to working with all of you. The city of Glendale is just the most beautiful place, and I love this city very, very much. I've served as a commissioner now. This is my 18th year as a commissioner in the city of Glendale. And I'm looking forward to giving my insight, both as a long-term resident and someone who has a family here, and also somebody who has really taken it upon himself to study the city through my role as an audit commissioner, understanding what staff goes through. I appreciate the welcome, and I appreciate the work that you've put into this. It's a tremendous amount of work. And I like that the public is showing up and speaking. It shows that they care and that it's an important issue for them. And I hope that anybody in the public who feels like they would like to reach out and discuss anything that I've mentioned or help educate me on the matter or, take me for a bike ride up and down Glen Oaks, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Put my agenda over.
I have a comment, actually. Okay, so first of all, welcome again, Commissioner Amirian. And then I just wanted to mention that we, with Commissioner Leslie, attended the Bicycle Transportation Planning meeting. And another one is coming up this Thursday. It went very well. And looking forward to this coming meeting. During that meeting, something came up that I was very, very interested in studying further. And if the staff can help me with that, I truly appreciate it. I brought up an issue during that meeting that the new buildings that we have around the city, I personally live at Altana building, and we do not have a bike or alternative transportation parking in the buildings. And then also, if I'm not mistaken, I have to clarify this. I've tried to do with the management, and I did not get a proper answer yet, but you cannot park anything else besides your car at the parking spot. So I wanted to conduct a survey and to understand what other new buildings. I understand the old buildings may not have the proper designated areas, and it's going to be hard to implement, but we have a lot of development happening right now around the city, and this should be actually probably like addressed to them to have proper designated parking for alternative transportation. And the ones who don't have or do not have any capacity to add something, at least if they can allow those the bikes or scooters, anything else, whatever people are using, be parked at the parking spots along with the car or instead of the car. So that's number one thing, that if staff can help me with the survey, or I don't know, calling them, addressing this issue somehow to figure out what are their current status right now, I'll truly appreciate. So another thing, I attended the Go Glendale bike safety training last week, and that was amazing. An amazing instructor, Natalie, she was teaching the safety rules, and I think it was very, very beneficial, and I would encourage this to actually be promoted for a wider range, and then to have more people attend, because this is not only for bike riders, but also car riders too, to know how to behave when they see a bike rider in the middle of the street, and to have the courtesy, what to do and everything. You said that you're very, you have empathy and you actually try to give more space, but not everyone is that way. So we need to actually encourage people to attend those trainings and know what to do. And then another last thing, along with the Hero House, the tech hub that we have in Glendale, I had visited Bay Area, San Francisco, and we visited a couple of startups, including the Berkeley Skydeck, also to understand what programs they provide for newcomers who wants to do startup. And it was a great networking opportunity for Glendale Tech Hub with Bay Area, Silicon Valley. And I'm very excited to witness how it's growing right now. And then the same way that we cannot actually predict how Glendale is going to become a bike riding, alternative transportation using maybe community in the next 20 years, the same way we could not imagine that one day Glendale is going to actually become a platform for startups and accelerator programs, and have an ecosystem developed in that way. So the same way I'm anticipating this to happen in 15, 20 years. So that's it for my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just have maybe a follow-up question. So to clarify, are you saying we do not have required bicycle parking with new construction?
No, we do not. At Altana, we do not have a bicycle parking, and I do not think that the city is requiring, correct me if I'm wrong, if the city is requiring for new buildings when they're building it to have bicycle or
even electrical vehicle parking.
Yeah. Electrical vehicle, I'm sure as far as cars they have even charging stations, but alternative transportation, no.
If I may, Madam Chair, we will refer this to our Community Development Department, who are responsible for the developments and the parking requirements.
Thank you. And I'll just have one item for my report, which is that I'm very grateful for Glendale's electric charging spot that is located next to the Fathers Club. I think I'm describing that right. Yeah, Verdugo, yes, that I have electric vehicle. It is a little bit older. It has a very low range. I would have been towed that night, but was lucky enough to make it. And it was just a fabulous and free spot to park, and uses solar as the electricity. So I'm just making a plug. Yeah, Verdugo Woodlands Dad's Club. I should know that. That's my child's school. Thank you. But making a plug, and that is a pun, that it was very helpful. So thank you, Glendale. And that concludes our meeting, right? With a motion. May I have a motion to conclude our meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Excellent. I'll second that. Thank you.